What popular 2024 NFL draft prospects that could fit what the Eagles need on offense and defense have we not been highlighting enough? We're going to get into that coming up next on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm Louie DiBiase, co-host of LOE. You can also find my work over at Bleacher Report, where I'm an Eagles analyst. On today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to highlight three prospects from the offensive side of the ball and defense for the 2024 NFL draft that could be early picks on day one and day two that fit what the Eagles need, but we really haven't talked about them a whole lot in favor of other prospects. Plus, the NFL just opened up an awesome new rule, and I think it could create a new Eagles jersey for 2024. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. So Gino and I, we've been in the lab the last few months just churning out draft content, mock drafts. I've been working on my rankings that we're going to get into these next few weeks, only 2 weeks away from the draft. I'm almost getting stressed out. There's not enough content, although we've been doing content for 3 months. I want more and more, speculation about trades up the board, down the board. Do they stay put at 22? All these scenario driven talks, philosophy talks. This is why I love draft season. And I think we've done a good job of hitting on a ton of prospects at pretty much every position of need that the Eagles could potentially take on day one, day two, day three. That's why even on Mock Draft Monday, we like to spice things up. And sometimes people don't like that we take a Darius Robinson in the first round, the defensive end from Missouri. And although we probably think that's not going to happen, we just want to explore all scenarios so we can highlight more prospects that, because again, you never know what a team's going to do. When you look at a media's draft board, what me and Gino like, a lot of the times that's not what the Eagles like. It's not what the NFL likes. Every single year, there's at least a few prospects on day one that you're like, oh, wow, I did not expect him to get taken. And every year, there's a bunch of guys that we talk about to death that fall to the second or third round, and you're like, wow, I really thought this guy was a first-round selection. I thought that about Keely Ringo last year. The Eagles got a guy in the fourth round that I thought was a late day one, early day two selection. So today, again, I want to highlight some prospects that we really haven't talked about that could be on the Eagles' radar that fit on both sides of the ball. I want to start with offense, and this is a guy that's stuck in a position that's extremely deep this year. I thought when you look at the wide receiver position in the past 5 draft classes, it's been banger after banger after banger. Every single year it's churning out studs. It's not taking as long for receivers to develop at the pro level like it used to. I mean, just look back 5 years ago to start in the 2019 class with A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel and Deontay Johnson, DK Metcalf. And every year it's been that trend of guys just becoming studs. Last year, again, you got Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, but wasn't nearly as good. This year, the receiving class is being back to a level of, 12 to 15 guys I'm just a really big fan of. And it's going to be that might be the hardest position to rank this year in the draft for me. Luckily, the Eagles really aren't in desperate need of a wide receiver. But I do think they could add one on day two to be that third guy if they don't really believe Paris Campbell's going to stay healthy, if they think DeVonta Parker doesn't have anything left. Even if they think those two can be good rotational pieces, they might want another slot in a slot-by-committee approach. Or, I don't think this is the case, but maybe they want a replacement to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith long-term, and they don't plan on, and I don't think this is true, so relax, but maybe they don't want to pay 2 receivers $25+ million a year. A receiver, and we've talked about this scenario a lot. You've heard me just always gush about Xavier Worthy from Texas, how that fit would just be so perfect for this team. Or, we've talked about Brian Thomas if he fell, Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, players that fit inside more, like my guy Johnny Wilson, the 6'5 giant from Florida State. But what if the Eagles don't want another deep threat? What if they don't want your prototypical big slot or your traditional slot shifty receiver a Roman Wilson from Michigan, or I should say a Hunter Renfrow, at the pro level? what if you want just a rack monster? What if you want like a poor man's Deebo Samuel in the slot? Because you're this year finally committed to not being at the bottom of the league in pre-snap motion, and you want a gadget player that you can get in space. And I guess you could use Paris Campbell in that way, but what if you want somebody that's more physical and he's younger and he's just a rack king? Because that's something you really, I don't want to say A.J. Brown can't get yards after the catch. He absolutely can, and so can DeVonta Smith. But when you're talking about their strengths, those two, like where is run after the catch ability? It's not at the top of the list. Dallas Goedert's one of the better run after the catch tight ends in football, but overall, I think Saquon Barkley's going to help in this way. But yards after the catch is a big thing for the Eagles this year, and I thought that production in that area was down last year. So what about Malachi Corley? And I know that was long-winded to get to Corley, but I think with everything I just said about the role in the slot, a rack monster like Corley would fit what Kellen Moore is looking for in that third player. It's why you guys heard me a lot during the offseason before free agency say, I would really like the idea of Curtis Samuel on the inside with DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown at wide receiver. Malachi Corley is a strong wide receiver that I don't think it's going to translate to like a wide receiver one at the next level. That's constantly your X, beating press man coverage, although he's a pretty solid route runner, really strong hands. Like he does everything pretty solid, but the one thing that he does elite is get yards after the catch in the open field because he's so hard to tackle. He's built just so strong in his lower body. He has really strong hands, like I said. He's explosive. I don't know. He's got great vision. He almost plays the receiver position sometimes like a running back, and I really noticed that up close and personal at the Senior Bowl, and I don't like to compare guys to all-star players, especially ones that I don't like Deebo Samuel, but Malachi Corley, if I had to compare him to, like, what's his ceiling if he becomes a star, what star at this level is he that was like a second to third round pick? It's Deebo Samuel. I think Malachi Corley is someone, again, I've talked a lot about wanting that deep threat in the slot, a bigger slot like Devontae Parker that they added, or a more traditional slot receiver to go with that committee approach, but maybe you want just a run after the catch king for Kellen Moore's more pre-snap motion heavy, get guys in space, more creative offense. Like Malachi Corley is a chess piece that I don't really think you have at receiver when it comes to stylistically speaking of A.J. Brown's style, DeVonta Smith, Devontae Parker, Paris Campbell. Corley would be a new element to this offense that we really haven't highlighted a lot on this show. So Malachi Corley, the receiver from Western Michigan, is a player to keep an eye out for. That's a day two receiver that I think could interest the Eagles. Another guy on the offensive side of the ball is offensive tackle from Washington, Roger Rosengarten. And I think we did select him once on Mock Draft Monday in the second round, but we really haven't highlighted him a lot when we're talking about tackle. Of course, I think the betting favorite right now for the Eagles when it comes to their first round selection, I want it to be corner, but I think they'll end up trading for an offensive tackle. They'll trade up the board, but let's say they do go corner. Let's say they move up for Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold, or let's say they sit at 22 or move up a few spots for a Cooper DeJean or a Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think at that point they would really focus in on, okay, the second round is where it's been our bread and butter for finding young linemen. Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, hopefully Tyler Steen. Let's do it again. Let's take the long-term tackle back up to Lane Johnson and the heir apparent at right tackle. Roger Rosengarten is a guy that I think Jeff Stoutland would have a field day with. He would love his style because what do the Eagles like in offensive linemen? They like athletes. Well, Roger Rosengarten is one of the most athletic tackles in this class. He ran a position best 4.92 40-yard dash. He's versatile. I think he can play inside and out, although he was primarily a tackle at Washington. I think Jeff Stoutland could teach him if they want him to play right guard and have Tyler Steen more be the primary tackle backup. Roger Rosengarten's a guy that, I know Patrick Paul, when you see these mock draft rankings, like he's a guy up there ahead of Rosengarten. I think if we're talking pick 50 or 53, that's where they go offensive line, and it should be tackle, not guard. I think Rosengarten's a perfect fit for what Jeff Stoutland's looking for. Athlete that, again, can move inside and out, get up to the second and third level. That's what Stout likes. Give him that ball of clay. Let him mold it. I like Roger Rosengarten from Washington. And then another receiver, I'm actually going to go back to the receiver well, and it's Tez Walker from the University of North Carolina, the Tar Heels. Walker is, when it comes to these other receivers, I think maybe in other classes, like last year, he would have been a much higher pick, but because of the depth of the class this year, because of his raw route running, he's got suspect hands at times. Like he got targeted, I felt like 12 times in that Senior Bowl game and only came down with a couple balls. Like, his hands could definitely improve, but man, when it comes to explosion off the line of scrimmage, when it comes to being able to track the football, getting deep down the field, this was Drake May's go-to guy at UNC. Tez Walker is a playmaker. Almost kind of gives me Nelson Aguilar vibes a little bit coming out of USC, which some people might roll their eyes at. But if you can get like a 2017, 2018 Nelson Aguilar type out of Tez Walker on day 2 or day 3, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Tez Walker is a guy that fits that mold of if you really want a deep threat to be that third guy next to Smith and Brown and Dallas Goedert, of course, and now Saquon Barkley, and be what Quez Watkins wasn't, or maybe what Paris Campbell is going to be, but I'm still suspect of that being the case, considering the guy can't stay healthy. Tez Walker could be an option at that 120th pick in the 4th round, or maybe you want to do a trade up in round 3. That's what, by the way, I'm convinced if the Eagles are going to trade up on day 2, I would predict it's from that 120th pick on day 3 in round 4. They're going to try to use that, I think, and get back into round 3. And a potential target, I could see a guy like Tez Walker who did meet with the Eagles over the last few weeks. So those are 3 guys that we really have not talked about on offense for this draft that could interest the Eagles. It's Malachi Corley, the receiver from Western Michigan. It's wide receiver from UNC, Tez Walker, and then offensive tackle from Washington, Roger Rosengarten. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, I got 3 defensive prospects for you that we've kind of let fly under the radar, at least on this podcast. So we'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you today by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, guys, we thank so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. By the way, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Got to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, I'm trying to bring some light to some new prospects that we haven't really highlighted a lot on Locked On Eagles. And of course, Gino and I, we both have our my guys. There's players that we're going to pound the table for on offense, on defense. And I'm not like going into, the deep barrel of prospects like day 3 guys, potential UDFAs. I'm still talking about players that could be first round selections, second round picks, third rounders, maybe even like an early 4th rounder. But they're guys that we haven't really talked about a lot that could interest the Eagles. So, for instance, on offense, I highlighted 2 receivers, Western Kentucky's Malachi Corley, UNC's Tez Walker, and then on the offensive line, Washington's Roger Rosengarten. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, I have a linebacker I want to highlight, a defensive tackle, and then a cornerback. All 3 positions I think the Eagles are very likely to take on day 1 and or day 2, for sure. So let's start with corner, and it's a guy from Georgia, and we talked about this the other day. Is Howie going to continue the theme of taking Georgia and Alabama prospects, although he's kind of milked that prospect pool when it comes to the Georgia defense? But there's a guy that I think could translate pretty well to this defense that if you move down from 22, you could justify as a late day 1 pick. He might be a surprise first-round pick that most mock drafts do not include him in. Or he's an option for that 50th pick or the 53rd selection if you're still looking for a boundary corner and don't want to go with a slot guy like Max Melton. It's Kamari Lassiter from Georgia. This is a guy that, again, just does everything well. I don't know if he's an elite player that's going to translate to a CB1, but he's got really good length. He has enough speed downfield to stick with any kind of receiver. Very physical, a good tackler. I think you can trust him in zone coverage and man coverage. Again, I think just a solid guy. I wouldn't be happy with this if this is the first round pick, and I would almost start to think it's Georgia overkill and maybe a little bit of a force, but at like pick 53, or if you trade down from 53, I talked about maybe moving up from 120 to get back into the third round. Maybe you move down from 50 or 53 to recollect a third round pick in this draft. If that's the case and you move down, I think Kamari Lassiter is somebody that could be an option. And then suddenly you've got Lassiter, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks, Isaiah Rodgers. That's a lot of young talent at cornerback to develop. So it's not just the school that would interest the Eagles, but Lassiter is a guy that I think is just very, very solid. And if they believe in the upside of Ringo and potentially even Eli Ricks and Isaiah Rodgers, maybe they just want another floor player here that had good college production. And I'm not saying he doesn't have any sort of upside. Like, he's got some pretty good traits. I like the length that he has, and that's normally what I look for in a corner, but not one of my top, 7 to 9 to 10 favorite corners. Like, he's maybe fringe top 10 for me. But I think for the Eagles, it's a player that could interest them that we really have not highlighted a whole lot. And another guy like that at linebacker that I do like, actually, but we really have just been highlighting more of the Peyton Wilsons of the world, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Edgerrin Cooper, of course. You all know we don't shut up about here. Cedric Gray, even from UNC. But it's Kentucky linebacker Trevin Wallace. And this is a guy that's perfect for what you need at linebacker right now. What do you need at linebacker more than anything? It's coverage ability, it's speed, getting from sideline to sideline, especially in a Vic Fangio defense. It's why they were so interested in Devin White and bringing him in even on a one-year deal, because Devin White, whether you believe it or not, or whether you believe in him or not in any other way, which is totally justified, he's not great in most areas right now, but one thing he does possess is elite speed for his position. So does Trevin Wallace. He clocked in at, I believe it's either 4.52 or 4.51 40-yard dash, but when you put on the tape, this guy is, watching him get sideline to sideline, crash downhill and pursue, like, he's a never say die kind of player, which I saw Jim Nagy tweet about Wallace the other day, and he said, like, somebody told him the biggest thing for a linebacker is speed, because when you have a fast linebacker, the play is never dead. The play is never over, and that's Trevin Wallace. Like, he looks like he's a 4.4 guy, like high 4.4s on tape, and he's got length. He's extremely physical. His pursuit is just relentless. And again, that's what I want more than anything right now at linebacker, and it's why I'm kind of getting more into the Devin White signing. It's like, yeah, he's got a lot to work on, but man, if he can get everything else to a certain floor, having a linebacker with that kind of speed is so important. And for a linebacker, that's how you stay in the field all 3 downs, is when you have that kind of ability. And so Trevin Wallace is a player that, if again they move down from 53 or get back into that, I think he's going to translate to like a 3rd round pick. Although, there isn't 1 or 2 like bona fide top linebackers. I think Edgerrin Cooper is the consensus top guy, but I don't know. You can make the case for Jeremiah Trotter, for Cedric Gray, for Peyton Wilson, but there's concerns about all these guys. For Peyton Wilson, it's the red flags of the medicals. For Cedric Gray, it's just, do you believe he has a high ceiling? Jeremiah Trotter Jr., same. It's like, he's not a super great athlete. Do you trust him on all 3 downs to be your every down green dot guy? Edgerrin Cooper, it's like, is he more of an outside linebacker that's more just rushing the passer? Like, what is he at the next level? So all of these guys, it's very debatable this year at linebacker who the top players are. And I think, honestly, you could make the case for Trevin Wallace. So if he was a 2nd round pick, would I be surprised? No. I would predict right now he's more of a 3rd rounder. So if the Eagles wanted him, it would be probably at the end of day 2, but I wouldn't be upset if like they took him at 53 or traded down a little bit. I think Trevin Wallace is a player that is really good and fits the exact style of linebacker that the Eagles want, that the NFL wants, that I want, that you really should want. Again, speed, coverage ability, pursuit. That's not saying those are the only 3 things to want in a linebacker, but those are like the 3 main pillars for sure. And then one other player, this guy is expected to be more of a day 1 pick compared to Lassiter and Wallace as well. And it's defensive tackle from Illinois, Johnny Newton. So we have talked a lot lately about the defensive line, about the edge spot, but then I made the case the other day on the show for, hey, if they're going to go trenches, which I don't want them to do, I honestly think defensive tackle makes more sense than the edge and offensive tackle. Because if you don't believe Jordan Davis is a 3-down player, and that's the big question, is whether or not you think they should go defensive tackle probably has to do with your belief in Jordan Davis as not an elite run stopper, which we know he can be. We've seen that the first half of the last 2 years, but as a 3-down player that can consistently affect the quarterback. If you don't believe he's that guy, and you don't believe Milton Williams is going to break out this year, and they're going to sign him to a contract extension, then defensive tackle is a bigger need than edge, long-term and short-term, and offensive tackle. And when you look at Johnny Newton, his tape from Illinois, like this is a pass rushing specialist that could replace Fletcher Cox on all 3 downs next to Jalen Carter. He had 7.5 sacks last year on the interior, 5.5 the year before. You look at this guy, doesn't really have the length for sure. Kind of like Brendan Fisk from Florida State, a motor player, relentless motor. Sometimes you guys see me roll my eyes when I hear motor because I think everybody should have a motor. But this guy never says die until the end of the whistle, which is huge nowadays with mobile quarterbacks. You need a guy willing to pursue. His rip and pull, like his pass rush moves, are so refined. He's crazy powerful. This is a guy that's going to get to the quarterback. And again, it depends on how you feel about Jordan Davis, whether or not it's worth a day one investment. Newton would be somebody that honestly you might even have to trade up for. I don't know if he would fall to 22, but we haven't really highlighted him at defensive tackle. We haven't really highlighted him at all on either side of the football. Johnny Newton's one of the better talents in this draft on the defensive side of the football. And I think I don't want to say it's a weaker class on the edge, but Newton overall on day one's one of your better pass rushers. So Newton's somebody I think would definitely interest the Eagles. So I think keep an eye out for Kamari Lassiter, the Georgia corner, Trevin Wallace, the linebacker from Kentucky, and then Johnny Newton, the defensive tackle from Illinois. All right, coming up next, we are going to stop some draft talk because I got to talk jerseys. The NFL just changed their helmet policy once again in a positive way. I have a suggestion for a new jersey. We'll get into it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. So we started this podcast in 2018. Of course, I don't want to say start. We took over for Ben Solak and Michael Kist, of course. And at that time, the NFL only had a one helmet policy, which never made sense to me. But for some reason, players were only allowed to have one helmet. Which again didn't make sense because if you got traded like a Golden Tate in 2018, you would get refitted for a new helmet anyway because you're not wearing a Lions helmet on the Eagles. So why can't you just fit a player for multiple helmets? It was a stupid rule. They used concussions and player safety as a justification for it. Didn't make any sense. They were ignoring a financial goldmine of alternate jerseys, vintage jerseys coming back. Then the Eagles were at the forefront of this rule change. Like since 2017, Jeffrey Lurie was saying, we're trying to get the league to change this rule. We're trying to get the league to change this rule so we can wear a Kelly green helmet and bring back the vintage jerseys. Finally, 2 years ago, that happened. The Eagles had already signed up for a black helmet, so we got that, which was pretty cool. And then this past year, of course, we got the Kelly green jerseys with the Kelly green helmet. The NFL, and again, and I said this on the podcast the other day, I'm like, the NFL does this where they make a change, but it's not enough change. It's like they take one small step forward when there was a bigger leap to be had. And while I don't want to complain because we got the Kelly green jerseys, I kept saying on the podcast last year, okay, but now that it's 2 helmets, why can't it be 3? Why can't it be 5? Like, why can't you just be college football where the Oregon Ducks are wearing a million helmet combinations? I'm not saying I want the Eagles to be Oregon and have 10 different jerseys and 10 different helmets, but like, why stop at 2? That doesn't make much sense to me either. The NFL also realized that this year, again, they're just slow to make change, I think, and they figure it out on the way. They figured this one out, so the NFL is now allowing a 3rd helmet to be had. So now the Eagles can have their midnight green helmet combination with their, classic jerseys. They can still have the Kelly green. Most people are saying, hell yeah, now we get the black helmet back with the black jersey. But I have a suggestion, and I've said this on Twitter before, and I always use a Miles Sanders Photoshop of this. Somebody, and I wish I could give them credit, but somebody did an awesome job of Photoshopping Miles Sanders into the Eagles' old early 1970s classic white jerseys, white jersey, white pants, and a white helmet with the green wing. So maybe instead of because you can still have the black jersey with the green helmet. That's what they did this past year, and I loved it. I thought the black jersey looked better, honestly, with the green helmet. I thought the black helmet was cool. It was creative, but I don't know. Was it really that creative though? It kind of looked just like the midnight green helmet, and it, from afar, it kind of looked like the green helmet still. So I think it's neat, but for me, I think you could do better. And so I want to bring back the white helmet with the green wing. Like, I think that would be sweet. And actually, Bleacher Report actually tweeted out a Photoshop job of A.J. Brown in the Kelly green jersey with the white helmet. And while this would be really cool, and you could do this for sure, you could also bring back the white helmet as well. Or I should say the white jerseys with this helmet. So, look at that. For our YouTube viewers, that's incredible. I love the white helmet. The green wing, maybe the green face mask as well. I think white face mask or silver would look good as well. But that, to me, would be my vote for the third helmet this year. The white helmet with the green wing would be awesome. And you could have a whiteout game, little Penn State action. Shout out to my Nittany Lions fans listening to the podcast. You could kind of have that style and go all white. Or like Bleacher Report suggesting here, you could wear them with the Kelly green, or maybe you want to do a more modern version of a white helmet and do a midnight green wing and wear that with either your current road jerseys or the home jerseys, or white on black. If anybody's listening to me that has really good Photoshop skills, I need all these jersey calibrations. Give me all of these collabs. Give me a white helmet with a black jersey. Throw them all at me. But I'm really excited that the NFL decided to adopt this new rule because, again, for the longest time, it just didn't make any sense. They were doing Color Rush, and Thursday Night Football was terrible anyway. I'm like, why not do a throwback Thursday Night Football and have everybody wear throwback jerseys? And you finally got that the past few years, and look how good it looked. Look how good the Eagles looked and the Seattle Seahawks with their 70s jerseys, and the Tennessee Titans, although it's disrespectful, they're wearing the Houston Oilers jerseys. Everybody looked great, and the NFL should want more of that. They do. I'm sure they saw the money when it comes to the Kelly green jersey purchases. How many people were buying a number 6 DeVonta Smith or number 62 Jason Kelce and number 1 Jalen Hurts? So now this is going to allow teams to have even more uniforms, create more. I don't know. I want a creative league in this way. That's why I love what soccer does. You've got teams every year wearing different jerseys and different colors than their normal color. Like Liverpool's wearing purple jerseys or pink jerseys when their colors are red and black and yellow. That's cool to me. I don't want the Eagles to do that, but I want the open mind. I want the creativity of college football, of soccer, of even the NBA and the NHL at times. The NFL has definitely been slow to catch up with jerseys, but they're getting there. 3 helmets. I know most people will probably vote for a black helmet to come back with Kelly green and midnight green. My vote, give me a white helmet. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Mock Draft Monday returns tomorrow, or I should say on Monday, so 2 more days. Can't wait for it already. Only 2 more Mock Draft Mondays left, so kind of sad, but that means the draft is right around the corner. We got you covered for 2 more weeks until the 2024 NFL Draft. Until then, though, I'm going to sign off right here on LOE. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.